Hi readers! Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I have read so far this year, 2021. I'm not going to be talking about any spoilers. I'm just going to be giving you some of my general overall thoughts about all the books that I've read. And this is the first reading wrap-up that I've done so far this year, so I have a nice chunk of books to go over. In case you don't know me, my name is Chris. I do 1-minute book reviews and all sorts of bookish videos. I also have some little critters running around here who may or may not make an appearance at some point during this video. So I'm not going to talk about these books in any sort of order of my favorites other than how I read them. So the first book that I am going to start with is the first book that I finished reading this year at the end of January, which is The Gunslinger by Stephen King. This book is the first book in King's Dark Tower trilogy, which I believe has 7 books altogether. And in my quick review, if you saw that one, I said that I did not think that this book was necessarily the best setup for the Dark Tower series. We really don't get much information in this book, and I'll just, this is how the book opens. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Throughout the next 200 pages or so, we don't really get a lot of information about who the gunslinger is, who the man in black is, and what's going on between them. We do get a little bit of information at the very, very end of the book. Like, we don't even get the gunslinger's name until the very end of the book, but I still don't think that it's enough to really, hook someone and get them excited for this series. Now, that being said, I will say that I have read this book before, and I have read a few other books in this series before, so I do know that it does get better. So, if you've read The Gunslinger and you're not too sure about it, I would say at least try reading book number 2, The Drawing of 3, before you decide whether or not to give up on the Dark Tower series. Like I said, the series does go on to bigger and better things, so I do think that it's worth giving a chance. Especially if you are any sort of Stephen King fan, then you definitely need to give this one a read. It's a really quick read. Like I said, it's only a little bit over 200 pages. So give this and The Drawing of 3 a read and then make up your mind. Now, let's move on to my second book that I finished this year, which is Majesty by katharinemcgee. Majesty is the sequel to American Royals, which was one of my top 10 favorite books from 2020. In fact, I liked American Royals so much that the day I finished it, I went out to Target to buy this book, the sequel. Now, don't get me wrong, I did enjoy Majesty overall, but for me, this unfortunately did not measure up to the original, to American Royals. The first half of the book, the first half of Majesty, I felt like it was a lot of the same stuff that was in American Royals, the same characters, they're in the same relationships or the same situations, so it didn't have that fresh, new, fun feel. But then we get to the second half of the book, and that's when things really started to change and pick up. So I definitely really enjoyed the second half of Majesty much more than the first half. I don't know if McGee plans on writing a third book in this series, but I really hope that she does because I really like all the characters and I would like to see their stories continue and see where they end up. So hopefully, if you're watching this, which I'm sure she's not, but if you're watching this, katharinemcgee, please do a third one. Thank you. All right, so moving on to number 3, the third book I finished this year is The Diabolic by sjkincaid. Now, this is a YA science fiction novel and was actually recommended to me by one of my followers over on Instagram. If you're not already following me over on Instagram, I'll put my social info in the description box below, but this year, for 2021, I'm committed to trying to read at least one book a month that is recommended to me by one of my followers. And The Diabolic was my first read this year, recommended to me by my follower Haley. So, like I said, if you're not already following me over on Instagram, please come on over and tell me what you think I should read next. So I actually think that The Diabolic is probably one of my favorite reads of the year so far. Not that I've read like a ton, but this one was definitely up there. So this story is told from the perspective of Nemesis, who is a diabolic. And what a diabolic is basically a genetically engineered person who is born and bred to be like the ultimate bodyguard. They go through this process that they call bonding, where they're basically bonded to a regular human, a regular person, and they're sworn to protect them with their life if necessary. So for Nemesis, she gets bonded to this girl named Sidonia, and Sidonia is the daughter of a galactic senator. Now, Sidonia's family has kind of, even though they're a powerful family, they've kind of fallen out of favor with the emperor and the rest of the empire, we'll say, for their views on religion and technology. So basically, even though this is a futuristic tale with space travel and space stations and all this stuff, most people that actually live on planets do not have access to a lot of technology. So, but Sidonia's family is kind of trying to change that, where the emperor and his court are trying to hoard all that information for themselves. So anyway, the emperor, not happy with Sidonia's family, calls Sidonia to come to his court. And obviously her family is like, oh no, that's not good. So they decide they're going to send Nemesis in her place. So Nemesis has to go to this court, pretend to be a human, try and protect her identity, try to protect anything from happening to Sidonia, and all this stuff. So, like any good royal story, this galactic court is just full of crazy characters. You know, everything that you would typically see in that kind of a story. The political intrigue, the backstabbing, the alliances, and who moves and counter moves. So I found all of that stuff really, really fascinating. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of what the setup of this book is. Because what Nemesis has to go through, I thought it was a lot. Like, I really felt for her. The emperor and a lot of his family they're just really awful. They're really awful people. So obviously Nemesis, because she's a diabolic, she has the tools to protect herself physically, but because she's trying to protect her identity and thereby protect Sidonia, it's a constant battle of what she can do versus what she should do, which I found really fascinating. It was a constant question of, ooh, how will she get out of that one? And I found that really fun. So I could go on and on about this, obviously, but if you like science fiction at all, I definitely say give this one a try. I found it really fun. And I even got emotional at one point in this book. I won't say why, but if you read it, you'll know. I think so. Let's move on to number 4, which is the first Artemis Fowl book by, and I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong, eoincolfer. I have no idea if that's how you pronounce his first name or not. I'm totally guessing. So Artemis Fowl is the first book in the series by the same name, the Artemis Fowl series, and basically this first book here is just a cute, quick fairy heist book. So I've done a couple videos on this already that I can link to, but basically Artemis is a 12-year-old boy and he's a self-proclaimed criminal mastermind. He's a genius. So at the beginning of the series, Artemis's father goes missing. He supposedly went down on this ship out in the ocean, but Artemis believes that his father did not die and that he's out there somewhere still alive. He just has to find him. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any way to find him or to fund his search for his father because his family doesn't have any money. So the whole setup of this book is that Artemis is trying to get money so that he can fund the search for his father. And Artemis decides that the best way for him to get the money he needs is to steal a bunch of gold from the fairies. So he hatches this elaborate plot to kidnap a fairy so that he can ransom them off for the gold that he so desperately needs. But unfortunately for Artemis, of course, it's not that easy for him because the fairy that he kidnaps, one Holly Short, turns out to be a lot more troublesome than he first thought. So, as a series for young readers, I do think that this book does a really good job of setting up Artemis, his family, their situation, and then the whole fairy world. I said this in one of my other reviews, but I really loved how the whole fairy side of this, the whole fairy world, was a really cool blend of old world magic and new world technology. I know there are a lot more books in this series. I moved on to book 2, which is the Arctic Incident, and I can't wait to see what happens with Artemis and his fairy friends, and how they interact in the future books. So it's a really fun series for younger kids, and I can definitely see why these books were so popular. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. Now, I actually thought that this was a short story collection, and it kind of is, but not in the traditional sense. So, in this story, we have fan favorite Simon Lewis as he navigates his time in the Shadowhunter Academy. Now, if you don't know anything about Simon Lewis, the world of the Shadowhunters, let's just say that at the end of the Mortal Instruments series, Simon has been through a lot at that point, and including the fact that he doesn't really remember everything from his past. He goes through a lot, but he doesn't actually remember all of the things that he went through. So that is kind of the setup of the book here, is that Simon is trying to both remember his past, create his future, and also try and become a shadow hunter. Which, in case you don't know, is basically a human that's enhanced with, like, extra strength and some abilities to help them fight demons. So shadow hunters are supposed to protect the immortal world and regular humans from demons and other otherworldly creatures. So during Simon's time at this academy, what happens is basically that there's a lot of visitors at the academy. They have guest speakers and lecturers and other people that are known throughout the Shadowhunter world. Like if you've read the other books, these are known characters. They come to the academy and they share some sort of story that is supposed to teach Simon a lesson. So, for example, we have this man, Robert Lightwood. He's a character from the other books. He used to be friends with this big bad villain character. If you've read the Mortal Instruments, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I'm trying to be vague. So he used to be friends with this big bad villain, and he basically comes into the academy, into Simon's classroom, to tell a story about his younger years and about how and why he became friends with this villain. And basically, like, the moral of the story is that he went along with things because it was easy. So this is supposed to help Simon figure out, like, taking the easy way is not always the best way. So all the stories are kind of like that. They all have little messages that Simon is supposed to learn that's supposed to help him on his journey. And of course, there is a story in here about magnusbane, and if you've heard me talk about this a million times, I'm sorry, but I'm a huge magnusbane fan, and I will take any chance I can to hear a story about him, so that was definitely my favorite part of this book. If you have not read any of the Shadowhunter books, or, you know, anything that Cassandraclare has written, this book is not for you. Don't do it, because you will not understand 90% of what's going on here. But if you are a fan of the Shadowhunter world, if you've at least read the Mortal Instruments series, then I do think that this would be a great book to add to your collection. Lastly, I'm going to talk about The Starless Sea, a book that I have not actually published a review about yet because this is a very divisive book. I've spoken to a lot of people that have read this book, and some people absolutely hate this book, and some people absolutely love this book. And I can understand both sides because this book is very unique and the writing style is not like any other book that I've ever read before. So first of all, basically the way the book is written, the way it's constructed, every other chapter in this book is a seemingly random story and then a piece of the, we'll call it the main plot line, which is about a young boy who finds a mysterious book in a library. So this boy, his name is Zachary Ezra Rollins, and I think the best way that I can kind of illustrate what's going on here is just to basically show you really quick in the beginning. So in the beginning of the book, we have, once very long ago, there is a pirate in the basement. The pirate is a metaphor, but also still a person. The basement could rightly be considered a dungeon. The pirate was placed here for numerous acts of piratey nature, considered criminal enough for punishment by those non-pirates who decide such things. Someone said to throw away the key, but the key rests on a tarnished ring on a hook that hangs on the wall nearby. So this goes on with a story about a pirate. And then we get to chapter 2. There are 3 paths. This is one of them. Far beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from the sun and the moon, upon the shores of the Starless Sea, there is a labyrinth, collection of tunnels and rooms filled with stories. Stories written in books and sealed in jars and painted on walls. Odes inscribed into skin and pressed into rose petals. Tales laid in tiles upon floors, bits of plot worn away by passing feet. Legends carved in crystal and hung from chandeliers. Stories cataloged and cared for and revered, old stories preserved while new stories spring up around them. And then it'll switch to another chapter. Zachary Ezra Rollins wakes up long ago and far away, or at least that's what it feels like. So basically, the entire book is written in this way, this back and forth. And although the stories in the chapters do seem very random at first, as the book goes along, you start to realize that these stories actually mean something. And you really have to read at least like 50% of this book before it starts to make sense. So for me personally, I actually really enjoyed the process of reading this book. It felt like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. I was constantly flipping back to past chapters to see what it meant and whatnot. But when it came to the end of this book, I kind of felt meh. Like, I was waiting for this last piece to click everything into place, and I did not feel like I got that. So this book has an ending that's kind of open to interpretation depending on how you take it, and I did not like that at all. The ending did not ruin the experience of reading the book for me, but it did leave me a little disappointed. So if you do decide to read this one, I definitely recommend either taking notes or using tabs of some sort because I do think you're going to need it. So if you are someone that you think you would like that sort of experience, definitely give it a try. If what I've told you, if you're unsure about it, maybe pass. I think you'll know within the first maybe 5 chapters whether or not this book is for you. So those are all the books that I finished so far this year. I hope you enjoyed my little wrap up. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up so I know to do more in the future. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. I do new videos every Sunday, Wednesdays, and sometimes on Fridays. All right, everyone, happy reading!